Hey friends, Boundless Divine here, artist, organizer, and spiritually based mental health advocate, and this is Divine Time. Alrighty, please like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. With that being said, we're gonna get into the topic for today, which is shadow work, and I'm so excited. So in this episode, we're gonna be talking about what is shadow work, why do we have to do it, what is a shadow, and how does your shadow show up in some trauma responses, and then we're gonna follow up with some journaling prompts. So it's well-rounded. Definitely stay tuned. Okay, so I have my notebook here because, I get caught up in the downloads sometimes, and this is just so meticulous. I don't want to miss anything. Okay, so why do we do shadow work? So I'm sure that you've heard the phrase as above, so below, as within, and so without. And if not, that's fine. We're going to explain that right now. So as above, so below. As happens in the spirit world, as happens in the heavenly realm, so too happens in the physical world. So an example of that would be like prayer, right? So you're praying, you're like, God, grant me money, relationships, resources, and stuff. Like you pray that thing to the unseen forces and the divine, and then suddenly you start getting all these calls. People are coming to you with opportunities. Someone's like, hey, you look really good, So like as above, as happening in the spiritual world, as below, as happens in the physical world, your prayers bring physical things to your reality, right? So as within, so without, as happens inside of you is also what happens in the world around you and your world, right? So as you think and as you feel, as you see. An example would be like the people who are like, all men are trash. If you think that all men are trash, you will only see trash men. Like that's what you project, right? As if you think that you're a good person, if you think that you are worthy and lovable, then you'll see situations in which you are worthy and lovable, as within, so without, okay? And so shadow work is basically that whole exploration of the as within and so without, right? And so the term shadow work was coined by Carl Jung. He was a Swiss psychiatrist, right? So I've studied Ifa, like I'm an Ifa, priestess in the African tradition, studied Buddhism and stuff. So while Carl Jung did coin the term shadow work, I do want to note that this isn't something that's exclusive to this psychiatrist. Like this is something that is really common in lots of different practices, the idea of like understanding your hidden desires and motivations and stuff. But this guy does get credited for using the term, and he deserves to get credit, because that's his term, right? But I do think that it's super cool, the fact that it was a psychiatrist who termed this shadow work something that lots of different spiritualists use. Because this is something that like I talk about very often in my life with my friends, sometimes on the channel, is like we get so caught up in semantics and the definitions of things. Like, is it mental illness or is it spirituality? Like yada, yada, yada. But so much of it just boils down to semantics. And like we all understand that there are things that go on inside of us that affect the outer world. And so for those people who may be like kind of cautious about getting into shadow work or spirituality or even astrology, because maybe you heard the astrology is like evil or whatever, like we're all kind of talking about the same thing, and it all goes back to the same place of love. All right, so anyway, where was I going with that? Oh yeah, so the term as within, so without, a lot of people will kind of just be like, oh, this is just who I am, or that's just the way the world is, and they'll think of themselves as like, just being down as luck, or all people as being bad. But that's actually not true. Like we are the result of our conditioning and the conditioning of those around us, right? So the shadow is basically the part that's not seen. So when you think about Freud's iceberg theory, like just in general with an iceberg, there's a part above the water that you see, that's in the light. But like the majority of the iceberg is underwater, it's in the dark, and you don't know what's going on, but it's all one iceberg. And that is our unconscious and our subconscious and our conscious. So the unconscious, the shadow, is the things that you don't see, that's in the deep, that are affecting what you do see. So again, the shadow is the unconscious things that you don't see that are affecting the conscious things that you do see. Okay? And so an example for that, okay, this is what I want to talk about. So what does this unconscious shadow affect? It affects our self-esteem. It affects our relationships. It affects our careers. It also affects our health, okay? And so how does the shadow get developed, you might ask? Well, there's like lots of different reasons. There's lots of different ways. There's this concept called epigenetics, and epigenetics is the idea that trauma can be passed down through generations. Like stress and everything can literally be passed from your genes. So like, you know, Black people, people of African descent, like those who are the descendants of enslaved people, that trauma is literally passed down in their genes and into us. But I believe, like, so too is joy. Joy is also passed down through our genes. Like, there's just some part of me that just laughs at things, like, all the time. And I think that while it's, like, we talk about generational curses and traumas, like, we should also, like, rejoice and be grateful for the generational joy that also gets passed down. Because we can't sleep on joy. Like, joy, faith, all that stuff kept people going for hundreds of years in slavery, you know what I mean? So let's not just only focus on the trauma, let's focus on our faith as well. But anyway, that is one way that the shadow manifests. It's literally things that you inherited. And then taking it from like a spiritual realm, some of your shadow could also be stuff from past lives. Like, I haven't done anything into my past life, like I'm not ready yet, but there are people who like do past life readings and stuff. There are even whole books on it. But like there are certain things you could have experienced in your past life that traumatize you, that influence the person that you are today. Like you might have these fears for like no reason. Like there's no intellectual, logical reason why you have a certain fear that you do. And then like on a more, I guess, like practical sense of what like more people would see, your shadow could also be developed by your experiences. Something that hurt you when you were a child, or something that hurt you as an adult. A relationship, like your first romantic relationship, the way that that could have wounded you, something someone said to you when you were a little kid. All of those things are influenced and create and influence your shadow. I'm sorry, someone just started drilling and it's distracting me, so bear with you, girl. Okay, so and I just wanted to touch really quickly on, so shadow can affect your health. Yes, absolutely. Similar to how, like, you know, what's happening on a cellular level when something, you get the wrong bacteria and you get a cold, you see the symptoms of like sneezing and stuff. Like your shadow can actually do that as well. Like I went to the chiropractor and he was like, this is the hardest neck I've seen in a while. I hold a lot of my tension in my shoulders because for the majority of my life, the most difficult thing for me to do was activate my throat chakra and express myself. And that resulted in literal knots on my neck. And so there are things that are happening physically where even like people who, you know, why a lot of people have like heart issues, who have dealt with lots of heartache, you know, so spiritual things that happen in the unseen actually affect what happens in the scene. Okay, and so different trauma responses. So I think that it's important to note trauma responses when dealing with shadow work, because your shadow influences the different ways that you respond to things. So someone who's like completely like secure and healthy and okay with who they are, they show up differently than someone who is operating from a place of their shadow. Like two people, this kind of just like I'm sure you'll hear from time to time, like what people say about you isn't a reflection of you, it's a reflection of them. Like you know, bring me everywhere that I go. And there's some people who really like me and there's some people who don't. But that's because everybody that we see is a mirror to us, and they show us things that we either really like and admire or aspire to be, or things that we fear or we hate. And so when you're operating from a place of your higher self, you're able to see the whole world as just things that are happening and respond. But when you're operating from your shadow place, from that wounded place, from that place of fear and frustration, then you're responding from a traumatized place, okay? And so how can that show up? So we have the different trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, okay? And I have my notes because, you know, don't want to miss anything. So fight, that can look like angry outbursts, narcissism, or controlling. And I kind of summarized fight as fight is using strength to avoid hurt. So again, fight is using strength to avoid hurt. And then you have flight, which is anxiety, perfectionism, and workaholic. And flight is trying to hide from the hurt. You have freeze, which is being trapped by the hurt. That's how I reduced it. But the different elements of that are feelings of stuckness, difficulty making decisions, dissociation, and just like shutting down. And then you have fawn, which is people pleasing, codependency, and lack of boundaries. And the way I summarize that is letting the hurt be your master. And so like, I know that can be like, wait, but fight, flight, and freeze, they also are responding from the hurt. Yes, but the difference is that with fawn, you allow those feelings of being hurt control you. It's like a bad attempt at controlling and not being hurt by being like, I'll just be likable. I was hurt and wounded in a relationship before, so I'll just be a perfectly likable person, so I'll never have to be hurt again in relationships. It's a cute thought, but it doesn't work that way. Speaking to me too. Okay, so, oh my goodness, this drill, I hope we were able to edit this out. So your shadow, just like love languages, like you have different ways of loving yourself versus your parent, versus your pet, versus your partner. It's the same thing with trauma responses. They show up in different ways, right? So personally, my shadow has influenced me. The way that my shadow shows up through trauma responses is through flight. So for example, like I went through a situation in which I got in a lot of debt, and it was traumatizing because I wasn't expecting to get into debt. Like I made a bad deal with someone. Make sure you do everything in writing. Like don't just take deals with people because they smile and look nice. So I got into debt, and as a result, like for almost a year, every single dollar that I made had to go, at least to some extent, towards paying someone. And that's stressful because it's like, it's not just like oh, you're in debt. It's like every time I wanted to like order takeout because I was too tired to cook, I would like mentally punish myself because my shadow was like, I don't like this feeling of being in debt. I feel insecure and unstable right now. And so I was traumatized by having to pay this money and like not being able to afford the things that I want. And so what was my result? Flight. I went to work. I was like, okay, I just have to get on my purpose, like be perfect, just work. You know, it became really important for me to like always be about grinding. Like, let me start this business, let me do this thing, let me do anything that I can to get money, let me work all the time, take every opportunity that I can so I can be safe. And that's not okay. And I feel like that's like the trauma response for, I would say, like a lot of us, even in terms of capitalism. This is just a download now. Like, you know, there's this whole idea of hustle culture, and like we talk about this, and lots of us are saying now that this is like toxic or whatever, but we're not talking about that. This is a trauma response. Like financial insecurity, when you talk about the chakras, whether that's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know, starting from the bottom to the top, or the chakras, the sacral to the crown, the bottom chakra is the root. The root chakra deals with feelings of safety and security and stability and structure, and not being financially secure can really wreck and like destabilize and block that chakra. And a lot of people are out here just trying to make it work, like with, what do they call it, like $1 a dream? I don't know, but like a lot, like, and that's traumatic. Like financial insecurity is traumatic. And so of course people work. Like, of course we don't, like people who don't want to work for a 9 to 5 and like want to go into business for themselves don't necessarily know how to take off that productivity hat, because we're all just trying to survive here, you know? And so that's like a really huge reason why, you know, me and lots of people, we go to flight in terms of like economic trauma, right? The shadow side. And then maybe people who grew up and they saw their parents didn't have a lot, so they internalized that, or whatever. And so then in terms of like relationally, I've noticed that my biggest trauma response from my shadow was fawn. So I grew up in an area where a lot of people didn't look like me. Like it wasn't until recently that the area I'm in became more diverse, but like I was probably one of like 5 black kids in my entire high school. Like, I was never really around anybody who looked like me. And so, like, I would hear things like, oh, you're pretty for a black girl, or you're so well spoken. And like the predominantly white area, the predominantly conservative area and education, they didn't prepare me with the tools and information and words that like could speak to my experience, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like full circle. But you think of the sociologist W.E.B. Du Bois, he talks about double consciousness. So it's funny that, like, you know, we're talking about that because that wasn't initially in the plan. But double consciousness is him talking about how, like, you know, black people, you have the experience of who you are as a black person, and like you just like, you know who you are. Like for me, I'm someone who likes to sing and dance and cartwheel, but then you also have the experience of who the world sees you as, which is like a black person. Like I know I'm someone who likes to sing and dance and cartwheel and will cry at commercials because I'm so emotional. But like if I were to get mad at someone who did something wrong to me and raised my voice, then I would be seen as an angry black woman. And I'm aware of that fact. And so as a result, for a while, I would have difficulty expressing my negative feelings because I knew that as a black person, like regardless of how silly and tender I know that I am, that I would be seen in different ways. And like I know everybody can relate to that, but double consciousness, like make sure you don't talk about that if you're not a non-black person, even if you're a woman or queer, because you know there are black women, there are black queer people, and so it's reductive. Like this is something that's, you know, double consciousness is completely just to the black experience. But then when you talk about the shadow, right? So for me, understanding like, okay, how does it feel when like the people around me are touching my hair or saying that I'm pretty with an exception, and knowing that if I were to pop off on them, then I would be seen as angry and I wouldn't be one of the good ones. And like in that area, love seemed like a limited resource and I was afraid of being alone. You see that? So that's shadow work. So even when I went out, you know, I spent a whole semester abroad, lived in Barbados, like mostly black people I saw every day. But those feelings of like feeling like I had to be perfect to perform, to people please and be codependent, they didn't just leave me. Like, and that's what like you take yourself with you everywhere that you go. Like those things that in my shadow of like having to be liked by people pleasing, they came with me in Barbados. They came with me at very diverse records. They go with you everywhere. And so that's why it's super important to identify those things, you know. And like also, you know, something that I want to touch on is people pleasing, right? That's how I mentioned that's my relational trauma response. So I'm also Libra moon and rising. I explain every episode I'm a spiritually based mental health advocate. It means that I use spiritual terms to determine how they affect our mental health, right? So as a Libra moon and rising, one of the biggest critiques for Libras are that they are people pleasers, right? And so when you talk about how it's like, oh, I'm not, so when you talk about that, it's like, oh, I'm just, this is the way that I am. Like you could say, yeah, that's the way that I'm designed to be. But the thing is, just because something may be your natural tendency doesn't mean that's how you have to be. Because on the high side of Libra energy is balance and fairness. So where in the shadow of the Libra who just wants to be liked, they might, you know, be people pleasers and codependent because they love partnerships and dualities. But when that Libra energy is aware of that shadow need to just be liked, they're able to use that to be really fair. And because they care so much about people and they want people to feel good and seen, then they'll be able to use their with confidence to come to a decision that's right for everyone because they care about what's best for everyone, and from a high vibration that everyone includes themselves. Does that make sense? Just like Pisces, right? High vibration, loving, empathic. Low vibration, they run away. They could have addictive tendencies, okay? But so you'll meet two different Pisces and you'll have two different experiences. But you know, that's because some of them are living from their shadow desires. And so there's no such thing as like a good astrological sign or a bad astrological sign. And there's no such thing as like this is my chart, so this is who I have to be. Like you have the ability to master the shadow sides of your makeup, whether that be numerology, astrology, or if you don't follow any of that stuff, just what you see for yourself. If you see that you keep popping off on people, then like maybe it's like, why is that? Why do I get so sensitive in my relationships with other people? That's something that I should investigate and uncover. You see, so shadow work is such like a, there's so many different levels to it, and there's so much more I could get at, but I just see we're at 19 minutes right now, so I'm gonna reap it up. And if you guys want to do like a follow-up episode on this, let me know, put it in the comments, and we'll run it back, okay, and do another one. But as promised, I'm gonna leave us with some journaling prompts, and for like final reflection, okay? So get your pen, get your pen, get your pen. So the questions are, what did you learn from the most difficult thing you've experienced? I'll say that again. What did you learn from the most difficult thing that you've experienced? So that's question number 1. And then question number 2 is, what is your inner child most proud of you for? I'll say that again. What is your inner child most proud of you for? Okay, so I'm gonna put these comments also on my Facebook, Boundless Divine, and that's where I share like more links and resources and positive posts and stuff. So you should definitely check me out there on Facebook, Boundless Divine. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter at Boundless Divine. But yeah, these are the 2 prompts, and so that's your homework for like further self-discovery and healing, or yada yada yada. And you know, there's something like agreeing with people in prayer. So when you set your intentions in front of other people, there's like power that accumulates, and I'm like not articulating that well. Christianity, the closest thing I can think of, they talk about having someone agree with you. So if you feel comfortable writing out or just putting like what you feel comfortable sharing in the comments, in particular about like the things that you feel proud of, or if you have any prayer requests for anybody, like I'm sure that there are people of many different faiths who would love to send you love. And make sure that you're sending love to like other people in the comments, because I'm really trying to make this a community. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope that this was a blessing to you. Please share it with someone that you think it'll help. And yeah, make sure you like it, like I said. And oh, if you want to send me a little love donation for the energy exchange, I could be blessed via Cashapp at Boundless Divine, and also found on oh, I already said Instagram, Twitter, whatever. But yeah, and also about buy me a coffee at Boundless Divine. This heckin' buzzing is driving me bananas. Okay, but remember that you are good, and you are worthy, and you are loved. Never forget who you are, because this world needs your light. Be kind with yourself, because practice makes progress, and all things come in divine time. And as you leave this space, may you go in peace, in love, and purpose, pleasure, and prosperity. In the name of love, Ashe. Thank you so much for coming, friends. And before you go, I just wanted to like mention something, that shadow work is so important, but it has to be done with love. Like, we could get so lost in the darkness, we could get so lost in the hurt, but it's so important to make sure that we supplement that with positive feelings. And that's why, you know, after doing the one with the hardest lesson, what did you learn doing about your inner child? So as you're going through shadow work, whether you're looking at prompts online, make sure that you finish it off with looking in the mirror and saying, yo, I love you so much. Make sure you finish it up with like hugging yourself and literally saying that I love you every single day. Make sure you follow up with petting your kitty that you love, or talking to a friend. Okay, so I just wanted to share that. But yeah, be well and be blessed. Peace.